All right, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call to order this public hearing of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. It is 3:09 p.m. on Wednesday, March 29th, 2023, and we are conducting this roundtable virtually and streaming on the DC Council's website and YouTube at CM Brooke Pinto. I am Councilmember Brooke Pinto, representing Ward 2 and the chairwoman of the committee. The Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety has oversight responsibility for matters affecting the district courts, criminal law, procedure, and justice, public safety, including policing, violence prevention and intervention, and civilian police oversight, access to justice, including victim services and justice grants, fire and emergency medical services, and the district's 911 and 311 services, forensic science, fatality review, and medical examinations, Homeland Security and Emergency Response, Adult and Youth Corrections, Family Law, Probate and Estates, Child Support, and Women's and Gender Policy. Today, the committee continues its review of the mayor's proposed fiscal year 2024 budget and financial plan. We will discuss the proposed budgets for the following three agencies this afternoon. First, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Second, the Department of Forensic Sciences. And third, the Mayor's Office of Women's Policy and Initiatives. We will first hear from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, or OCME, which investigates all deaths in the district that occur as a result of violence, as well as those that occur unexpectedly without medical attention, in custody, or pose a threat to public health. OCME provides forensic services to government agencies, healthcare providers, and citizens of the DC metropolitan area to ensure that justice is served and to improve the health and safety of the public. The mayor's proposed FY 2024 budget provides OCME with approximately $15,763,579 and a 2.3% increase over last year. This includes a $307,000 cut to forensic pathology and a $920,000 and 15 FTE cut to mortuary service. The mayor has also proposed creating a new activity for the medical examiner transport team with over $1 million and 13 FTEs. I'll be speaking with Chief Medical Examiner Diaz about the decision to create a new medical examiner transport activity and how this team will support the body transport services already provided by mortuary services. I'm especially concerned about how these cuts will impact the agency's ability to provide timely forensic pathology services, considering the agency is already understaffed in this area. Only 54% of autopsies were completed within 90 days in fiscal year 2023. As our city continues to experience a rise in opioid deaths and gun violence fatalities, it is critical that OCME has the resources they need to complete examinations in a timely fashion so that family members and law enforcement can receive the information that they need. We will also hear today from the Department of Forensic Sciences. The department's mission is to provide high quality, timely, accurate, unbiased, transparent, and reliable forensic science services to district and other law enforcement and investigative agencies with the overarching goal of enhancing public safety. In 2021, the American National Standards Institute withdrew accreditation for several of the DFS's key forensic sciences units based on findings of significant deficiencies in the agency's handling and analysis of certain evidence, staff training, and oversight, as well as other protocols. The mayor's proposed FY 2024 budget provides DFS with approximately $20,636,000 of cuts, which represents a 37% decrease over last year. The agency's proposed budget also cuts DFS by 125 FTEs, more than 55% of existing staff levels. And these cuts reflect a really drastic reimagination of the department as it currently operates. The mayor has shifted two of the agency's three divisions to other agencies, The Crime Scene Services Division is relocated to MPD, and the Public Health Laboratory to the Department of Health. These shifts, which we'll be discussing with the interim director, are only a part of the picture. The mayor also proposes cutting about 16 FTEs from the Forensic Science Laboratory, more than a quarter of that division's current staff. I'm concerned that this budget proposal signals regarding the mayor's vision for DFS and critically reaccreditation of the several DFS units that have lost accreditation, which I know is of concern to all of us in the public safety space. I also have concerns about the shift of CSS to MPD and the effect that that shift may have on the quality and independence of the analysis completed by those staff. There's a lot to unpack in the DFS budget, and I look forward to my discussion with Interim Director Crispino on this today. And last, we will hear from the Mayor's Office of Women's Policy and Initiatives, which aims to support and advocate for women in the district through research and community involvement. OWPI is also responsible for providing programs and workshops for women in the district to advance their health and economic status. Excuse me. Unlike other agencies, offices, and commissions overseen by this committee, OWPI does not have a standalone chapter within the mayor's budget proposal. Instead, OWPI is funded within the budget of the Executive Office of the Mayor. The mayor's proposed FY 2024 budget provides OWPI with approximately $450,000, a $44,000 decrease from last year. And I have questions for Interim Director Reyes today about the expected impact of the $44,000 cut and her plans for the office as interim director, especially when we need to see more support and programming for women in the district. See if any of my colleagues are with us today. Okay. So for today's roundtable, we will follow the committee's normal practice and hear from public witnesses first, followed by our government witnesses. Public witnesses will have 3 minutes to present their testimony, and those who represent organizations will have 5 minutes. So I will call today's panel of witnesses. We will hear from first Sabrina Richardson, public witness, and next from Karen Mulhauser, public witness.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Richardson. When you're ready, please go ahead.
Hello. Good afternoon, Council, and those that are on the panel today. Me this opportunity to give my testimony. My testimony will be brief and to the point today. On September 9th, 2022, tragedy struck my family when my cousin was found deceased in the DC government building at 3720 Martin Luther King Avenue Southeast. A heartbreaking scene that no one should ever have to face. Monique was one of our city's special needs adults. Monique's body was found in good condition, as I was told. She was transported to the DC Medical Examiner's Office, for whom the city entrusts their loved ones to be cared for until a funeral home has been chosen for her services. I spoke with the doctor that was assigned to Monique's case on Monday, September 12th, 2022. And she assured me that Monique was okay. She assured me that she was resting and the DC Medical Examiner's Office would take care of her until I chose a funeral home for services. I trusted that to be true. However, when I received a call from my family's funeral home, and I was told that we could not have a viewing because Monique's body was too decomposed to view, I asked to see her. Being a former autopsy technician with the DC Medical Examiner's Office, mortuary science major, forensic science student with certifications through DC MPD, forensic science and mobile crime department, I immediately knew that the body was stored improperly. The conditions in September when Monique was found inside of the DC government building with flowing air, no insects involved, and the body being found less than 24 hours, would not have been in that condition if that was true. I want answers. I never want this to happen to another family. This caused her mom, which is my aunt, to have a severe stroke shortly after viewing pictures of Monique's decomposed body. The condition of her body looked and reminded me of Emmett Till. The next time one of your doctors ensure a citizen that their loved one's body has no trauma or injuries, and that they're okay and resting, please be able to give some type of answer when the family views and clearly sees that the body is not in the condition that was told to them. I would never want a family to experience what my family is going through right now. We have no closure. We will not stop here. Something has to be done. There can be no cuts to the DC Medical Examiner's Office. This was unacceptable. I will say in closing, you never know who loved ones will come through your agency, and everybody should be treated with dignity and respect.
Thank you so much, Ms. Richardson, for sharing your story and your painful story. And I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think it's a really important point that we never know who's going to be going through this really important agency. And I know that the director will share your view that all bodies and people should be treated with respect. So thank you very much for being here today, and we'll keep doing everything we can to support the agency.
Thank you.
With no further public witnesses, I will now turn to our government witnesses, starting with the Chief Medical Examiner, Francisco Diaz. Welcome. And as you know, it's the tradition of this committee to swear in all government witnesses who appear before it. Since we have all three of you, if you all want to take yourself off mute, we can do this one time as we move forward. Director Reyes, if you can hear me, if you want to take yourself off mute, I can swear you all in. Great, thank you. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Chief Medical Examiner Diaz to make any opening statement you may have.
Thank you, Council Member Pinto. And with your permission, I'm going to read my testimony briefly. Good afternoon, Council Member Pinto, members of the committee and committee staff. I am Dr. Francisco Diaz, Chief Medical Examiner. I am pleased to testify before you today. Mayor Bowser has presented the district fiscal year 2024 proposed budget and financial plan, a fair shot. This budget focuses on getting the best outcomes for residents by bolstering city services, improved experiences of residents and business interacting with the district government, and providing greater opportunity for residents to learn, grow, and thrive. The primary goal of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner is to support and serve our citizens in their most critical time of need, the sudden and unexpected loss of their loved one. To achieve this, our agency operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. The key performance objectives of the agency include, number one, efficient and quality medical legal death investigation, toxicological analysis, family assistance, and expert testimony. Number two, effective quality management through continuous process improvement and quality control, including maintenance of certification accreditation by the National Association of Medical Examiners and by ISO certification provided through ANAB. Number three, providing service as a public health and safety surveillance organization. Number 4, providing expertise as the district fatality management authority. Number 5, and final, creating and maintaining a highly efficient, transparent, and responsive district government. Overall, we work to provide the unbiased, independent death investigation of approximately 7,000 cases annually, which includes accepted medical examiner cases, cremation requests, and storage cases. Of note, and I want to underline this, the accepted medical examiner caseload has increased by approximately 41% comparing the years 2017 to 2022. 41% increase. In placing public safety as a priority, the mayor's proposed budget addresses the critical needs of the agency resulting from its increase in caseload. The agency 24 budget proposed gross budget for the agency, as stated before, is $15,763,579, including $400,000 in federal resources. This represents a 2.3% increase over approved F23 general funds and a 35.4% decrease in federal resources. More specifically, the agency's 24 budgets provide an overall $352,000 increase in gross funds from fiscal year 23, consisting of a personal service budget increase of $344,000 or 2.7%, and a non-personal service budget increase of $7,000 or 0.3%. The proposed F24 budget includes a personal service budget of $13,196,000 and a non-personal service budget of $2.5 million. This funding enables the agency to provide the services of its core mission and functions through the procurement of the requisite supplies, specialized equipment, IT infrastructure, professional services, consultations, and training. This is accomplished through our 4 agency divisions. The Death Investigation Division is comprised of several units, including forensic pathology, board-certified medical examiners with the chief and the deputy medical examiner, anthropology laboratory, identification unit, histology laboratory, death investigation unit, mortuary unit, medical examiner transport team. This division performs the important work involving death scene investigation, decedent transport, post-mortem examination, forensic photography, and certification of cause and manner of death. The work of this division is the foundation of the NAME, National Association of Medical Examiners, reaccreditation that the agency recently received in February, and our international organization for standardization or ISO accreditation. This division proposed budget for FY24 is $8.5 million approximately, and 56.7 full-time employees. Another division is the toxicology laboratory, currently accredited by the American Board of Forensic Toxicology, which tests nearly 1,400 cases per year, which includes about 8,600 specimens. In addition to performing testing on medical examiners' cases, 30% of the laboratory testing is dedicated to DUI program cases for law enforcement agencies such as MPD, United States Park Police, United States Secret Service, and approximately 10% of the testing is for drug-facilitated sexual assault. Moreover, the laboratory continues to lead the district's breath program, the technical maintenance of the breath intoximeter instruments, and trains MPD officers in the use of the breath testing instruments. The proposed budget for the laboratory is $2,530,000 with 14 full-time employees. The mayor's FY24 proposed budget also provides $3,359,000 for the administrative management program division to support 20 full-time employees. That includes key aspects of quality control and records management. This division manages the records depository for the entire agency and processes on average about 6,000 medical examiner and cremation cases, as well as storage requests. The breakdown of the cases include about 3,000 cases reported for investigation and about 3,000 cremation and storage requests. The work entails research, compiling the decision record and case file, archiving and responding to record requests. The FY24 budget will support this work, as well as continued efforts towards digitization, e-signature, and proper record retention. The FY24 budget also supports the agency's effort toward continued enhancement of its quality management program. The Fatality Review Committee's division FY24 budget is $1,214,000 and supports 11 full-time employees in conducting the important work of the division in reviewing developmental disabilities, child, infant, and maternal fatalities, as well as those fatalities associated with violence and opioid-related death. Agency funding is critical to support all agency division work, which supports the maintenance of its accreditation to include, as stated before, the National Association of Medical Examiners Accreditation, American Board of Forensic Toxicology, and the International Organization for Standards. The agency also utilized funding to implement a comprehensive vicarious trauma program for all agency employees. In fiscal year 22, the program was funded via a sub-grant from the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. The purpose of the grant was to provide mental health and wellness training and resources. The agency was able to provide workshops, stress relief sessions, and a health and wellness day for all employees. Moreover, the agency procured numerous books, training materials, and other resources to continuously address the issue of vicarious or secondary trauma amongst employees. While the grant has not been continued at this time, the agency plans to maintain its vicarious trauma program based on those resources procured in fiscal year 22 and use of any requisite funding from its fiscal year 23 and 24 proposed budget. It is important to state that the agency has consistently maintained a commitment to the principle of fiscal responsibility in its budgetary spending plan. We will continue to support the public's trust through fiscal accountability as we manage our current fiscal year 23 and proposed fiscal year 24 budgets. In closing, the resources allocated to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in the Mayor's FY24 budget play a critical role in supporting residents' effort to reach and remain on the pathway to the middle class. The Council and this committee are critical allies in this effort, and I appreciate your work to ensure we operate efficiently and effectively. I look forward to our continued work together to achieve our shared goals and give all residents a fair shot to benefit from Washington's DC continued prosperity. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Director Diaz. It's good to hear your perspective on some of the pieces that you're moving forward this year. And thank you so much for all of the work that you and everybody in your agency completes. Very challenging work. I want to begin by discussing how this budget will impact the agency's ability to provide timely forensic pathology services. And we heard about this from our public witness as well. The mayor is proposing a $307,000 cut to forensic pathology. Will this budget allow OCME to be able to complete 100% of autopsies within 90 days in FY 2024?
And if you are so kind and allow me to provide an explanation, I think there is a, on your opening statement, you stated that the completion rate for our office was 54% in 90 days. That completion rate will not allow OCME to be accredited because the minimum is 90 days within 90% completion within 90 days. We have achieved that since the year 2016. So I don't know if there was a miscommunication. We just recently, as 3 weeks ago, we got an extension from our accreditation. Every year, the accrediting agencies review the numbers and review all the issues that pertain to accreditation. More specific to your question, are we going to be able to? The answer lies in the number of cases we handle. And let me put things in perspective, if you would. When I first came to the district as Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, that year we have accepted cases, 3,200. And the following year, the same, 2018. 2021, 2022, approximately 4,500. So that is a net increase that goes from 30 to 40%. That's the number of cases we're getting, natural death, drug-related death, as well as homicide. It's a matter of the number of cases we get. And as it is, the office, as compared to other offices in the United States, it's well-funded. But that's an issue, or that's an equation that the answer lies in the number of cases we are able to process with the personnel we have. And I would venture to say, so far, yes. One example, if you know, from the testimony that I read, one of the positions that was reduced was a full-time employee, a forensic pathologist, meaning a medical examiner. If that position is not fully restored to one full-time employee, then I cannot hire an additional medical examiner that is needed, because that's part of the accreditation process. And to that end, I will use myself as an example. As a director, but also as a practicing forensic pathologist, last year I did 266 cases. So not only I am the director, but I'm also on the schedule, same as Dr. Brillen, who is also in this roundtable. As the deputy chief and medical director, she performed 274 cases. So that's how we cope with the increase in cases. It is worth of note that that increase in cases, it's happening nationwide. All medical examiners and coroner's offices are confronted with what's being called an excess number of deaths, and for various reasons that I think are beyond the scope of this hearing. In terms of Ms. Richardson, the public witness, I'm aware of the case. I respectfully disagree with a couple of her statements. However, I will personally reach out to her for some further explanation, and hopefully we can meet, if not over the phone, preferably in person.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Director. And I certainly did not mean to misspeak or underrepresent the amount of autopsies that you have been successfully able to complete within 90 days. And so my apologies for that. We'll try to find out where that number came from. I think I may have misunderstood as part of our oversight hearing for where we were on numbers. So just to confirm that you're at 90%?
Yes.
90% are completed within 90 days. And
yes,
how many additional staff do you think it would take realistically to complete about all autopsies within 90 days without having you participate? I'm extremely grateful that you are, doing everything you can to support your agency, but in theory, we should have enough FTEs for you to be able to lead the agency and analyze the trends as opposed to conducting the autopsies yourself.
And I appreciate that, Councilmember Pinto. I really do, but I'm an old-fashioned physician. I think physicians should be doing, first and foremost, if one has, like myself and Dr. Brillet, administrative responsibility, there should be time to also fulfill our duties as physicians. I don't think one thing negates the other. Unfortunately, positions like medical examiners are hard to fill because it's not a popular subspecialty in the United States for various reasons. People don't want to be public servants. People don't want to deal with the vicarious trauma and so on and so forth. And again, that's an issue that is plaguing the United States. It's, as of 2023, is 500 forensic pathologists board certified, and the United States probably needs 1,500. So you can see where the there is a huge gap between what the United States need and what we have. We're lucky that we have 7 board certified forensic pathologists. I used to work in Detroit, that is 3 times as busy as the district, and they only have 4 right now, just to put it in perspective. Now, I want to clarify about the 90-day completion in 90 days, 90% completion in 90 days. It will be great to complete 100% in 90 days. However, that's an aspirational issue. In reality, there are cases that cannot be completed because more time is needed. And I will give you an extreme example. I have a case that may be approaching a year old. However, I'm not able to finalize it because it's a skeletonized remains. So I need to be sure of the identity. There are other cases that you need more time in order to perform a very thorough investigation. So there are always going to be outliers in that. Those should be exceptions. They shouldn't be the norm. But as a forensic pathologist has been doing this for like nearly 30 years now, I can tell you that the numbers are the numbers in the sense of you need a to put a standard where reasonably, if you have all the information, all your studies, a significant percentage should be done. But there is also a small percentage that you need to give it a little bit of time for issues to clarify, investigation, records, really specialized studies, and so on and so forth. However, I think that as opposed to other medical examiners, we don't have any backlog and other issues that plague other medical examiners.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I hear that. But one of the things that we're looking at with your agency and a lot of our agencies in the public safety cluster is not just with funding for staffing, but how we can do a better job building the pipeline, attracting candidates, retaining good candidates. And you talked about the associated challenges with vicarious trauma as being one of the reasons perhaps that people choose not to go into this important profession. But the funding through OVSJG for vicarious trauma services for OCME staff was cut in this budget. Can you explain what services that you expect to be able to provide in fiscal year 2024 versus what was provided when the program was fully funded?
We plan to continue as much as possible the same programs we had. Through contractors, we got several programs in terms of providing some, I will call it training to our staff, which is specialized personnel in terms of psychology and vicarious trauma that provided us with the risk of being redundant with programs. And they came to our office and work with our employees. Some of them were like we are now with through webinars and through different activities. So we plan to continue, and we plan also to apply through several federal grants and in order to achieve that result. Vicarious trauma is an issue in all branches of forensic sciences because we deal with death on a daily basis or with tragedy. So we plan to continue those programs as much as we can.
And on staffing levels, I noted that the agency's proposed budget cuts funding available for overtime pay in half this year. Admittedly, the agency budgeted just $185,000 for this last year, so budgeting $75,000 in FY 2024 isn't a drastic change, but OCME has spent over $200,000 a year on overtime in recent years. Are you budgeting enough for overtime?
As compared to other years, no. And part of the overtime budget is that's how we've been dealing with the increase in the number of cases and the complexity of cases. So probably that's not enough, but that's a way to achieve a balanced budget throughout the years, at least the 6 years I've been here. That's a number that changes. You try to adjust by offering overtime if possible, and sometimes you don't. My concern as the chief medical examiner is the consistency in the increased number of cases. And based on my experience, and it's non-scientific, I don't think the number of cases are going to go down. So that's something that we all need to confront. I understand that at some point, you have to use what it's called resource utilization. So the pipeline of monies and resources is not, may not be there, and you need to adjust. That's the reason we were so actively seeking accreditation, because through the accreditation is that you can sustain the a minimum of quality work. I work in places and I know of places where budgets have been cut drastically, and then quality goes out the window. That's when bodies accumulate. That's when releases cannot happen. That's when even examinations in other places, Ms. Richardson, who was the public witness, testified, and I can give my own testimony. Somebody called me.
And Mr. Diaz, I'm just going to ask you kind of wrap up this question because we're going to move on to another topic.
Absolutely. Yes. Just wanted to tell you one thing, because you mentioned the pipeline. We are proud that we were approved for training pathologists to become forensic pathologists. That's the first time that it was that the OCME in the district has a training program in forensic pathology. We trained our first fellow, and we hired, and she is now an attending. And that program is also accredited. And through the years, that's how we plan to have a pipeline of forensic pathologists to service the district if they choose to work in the district.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's great news. So moving on, Dr. Diaz, to mortuary services. The mayor is proposing a $920,000 and 15 FTE cut from mortuary services. And I understand that mortuary services is responsible for providing body transport and autopsy support to forensic pathology staff and the funeral industry. But the mayor is proposing establishing an entirely new activity just for a medical examiner transport team with 13 FTEs. So can you explain, is this a transfer of one of funds from just one activity to another? Or how will the responsibilities of these two activities differ? Why do you think it's necessary to establish a new activity for this purpose? And in making this shift, the mayor is reducing the number of FTEs from 15 to 13. So do you think that will have an impact on the body transport services that we're providing?
I think I'm a little puzzled, but let me explain, and I will try to be brief and not long-winded. There are two divisions. The mortuary division, that's the personnel specialized on autopsies. They perform the autopsies, the external examination, the evisceration, and so on. There is another division that was created in 2018, and it's called the Medical Examiner Transport Team, separate and apart from the mortuary personnel. They are tasked to responding to the scene along with the medical legal death investigators, retrieving the body, bringing the body to OCME, and then doing all the processes in order for the intake, and also they do the release. So that division was, before that, what occurred in the district, there was a private contractor who did those retrievals. And OCME was very intentional in having OCME employees as a separate division to just handle that. Go to the scenes, retrieve the bodies, process the body, release the body, and so on and so forth. But that division has been with us for the last 5 years. And so that's what I was puzzled at the beginning, because this is not new. Those two divisions have existed for the last 5 years.
Okay, so it really is just kind of a activity load shift as opposed to an actual new function.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So for fatality review committees, the staff were previously under one activity, which was listed as the Child Fatality Review Committee. And the mayor is now proposing to shift these two to a new activity called the General Fatality Review. But in making this shift, it eliminates at least one FTE. Considering the fatality review committees are already so understaffed and several are behind in their reviews and reports, why is an FTE being cut, and what impact will this have on the fatality review committee's ability to complete their work in an accurate and timely fashion?
And if you are so kind, if Ms. Jenna, who is the manager and coordinator for the fatality review, could answer that. Ms. Jenna?
Sure, no problem. And I'm just going to swear you in. And if there's anybody else in your team who's going to be answering questions, I can do this all at one fell swoop.
Yes, for now, I'm the only one. Good afternoon.
Okay, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon. In response to your question, it's not actually an elimination of a position. That one position is a grant-funded position. The agency that actually applied for the grant intra-districts the money, and because of the new financial system, that position is actually included in that agency's budget. So we're not actually losing a position. And then the change in the budget category is just because we have so many committees now, we're not just child, so it's just changing actually the name and the line item of that budget code.
Okay. I'm sensing this is a theme for today, and this came up with a number of the agencies in the morning that would appear like cuts, folks are saying are not really cuts, and we're just shifting it around. And so it could be useful if you all could supply the committee with a crosswalk so we can see where these transfers are going to and what they actually mean in practice. But thank you for that. And in terms of the fatality review, One area that I think we could benefit from learning more information about is with the Transgender Fatality Review Board. As you know, trans women, especially trans women of color, face high rates of violence in the district. And I think it's really critical that the district government focus on these fatalities and produce recommendations for how to reduce violence and other harms against trans women. And standing up this board might be nuanced enough to require permanent legislation rather than just a BSA subtitle. But I just want to ask your thoughts on the benefit of standing something like that up. Is this something you'd be supportive of? And what does it take to stand up a separate fatality review board? Who do you think should be involved in that process?
I think it's a great idea. I'm sure some of those cases could potentially be identified through the current committees that we have, depending on the manner of death that the decedent died with. And if it matched with one of our other committees, we could prioritize those cases as a certain review with those committees, as opposed to having to create another committee review board or official committee. But if it were to be a board, depending on the number of cases, I think we would need to look to see how many cases it would require. In terms of standing up the committee or board, it would either be a mayor's order or the legislative process, which sometimes can take time. But really, you need to gather ideas and information from those in the community, identify community partners, which agencies would be most valuable to be able to make recommendations and changes.
And when you say it could be done with the existing boards, what do you think would be the most appropriate avenue for a more granular analysis of trans women deaths?
I think either the legislation or mayor's orders that govern and the practices for those review boards would just need to be amended to prioritize.
But I'm sorry, I'm just asking about which review board do you think would be the most appropriate if it weren't going to be a standalone?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Most likely the Violence Fatality Review Committee, because my understanding is a lot of those cases are attributed to violence, homicide, or suicide, but they could also fall under the Opioid Fatality Review Board if they were drug related.
Okay, that makes sense. And would you all be supportive of adding a representative from OUC to the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Committee?
I can't answer that only because the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board is under the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. That's not one of ours.
But do you think, you can't answer on their behalf, but do you think that given your experience with these cases, that the value of perspective someone from OUC could be useful?
I do believe so. And if they're not an official appointed member, I do know that that board has the ability to invite members from that office for special circumstances to share their information on cases, as well as provide their recommendations at any time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So back to staffing enhancements, the budget proposal includes an additional FTE for each of the following 3 activities. Can you explain why they're each necessary? Those 3 are: first, information technology; second, the data fusion center; and third, the anthropology and identification.
You cut off, council member. I don't know if you can hear me, but I heard you like broken up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I can hear you. I was just asking if you can elaborate on the value of a new FTE that's proposed for information technology, data fusion center, and anthropology and identification.
Yes. I will start with the last one, anthropology and identification. Our anthropologist is also the head of the identification unit. What does that mean? That means that that unit helps families through the identification process, through working with funeral homes. That's also a unit that works 7 days a week, 365. Now we have 4 staff, and due to the increased number of cases, an additional FTE will be extremely helpful. The Data Fusion Center is our unit that is comprised of epidemiologists and analysts. And as you are aware, we provide data in terms of autopsies, death investigation, and so on to our stakeholders in the district, to federal stakeholders, and so on. So it is very important now that we have, not now, but we have to produce annual reports, not only for OCME, but for fatality review. We have to provide data to the Center of for Disease Control, as well as the Department of Health in the district. And other analysts will be very beneficial in terms of analyzing the data, what it means in the context of everything that is happening. And so those increases go along with the number of cases that we have experienced, the increase in the number of cases.
Okay, thank you. Oh. Sorry, let's place here. So Dr. Diaz, I'm very concerned about the rise in opioid overdoses and the work that OCME does to investigate these deaths and identify when there are bad batches of drugs in the community is really critical in our efforts to prevent additional fatalities. I understand that OCME is expected to lose $208,525 in funding due to a reduction of the comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance abuse program federal grant. Can you describe the impact this reduction in funding will have?
It will have an impact in terms for us to continue to provide post-mortem analysis, for example. And we do perform autopsies and comprehensive toxicological analysis on every single death. Example, just to put it in context, 2014, 84 drug-related death in the district. 2022 calendar year, 450. That's a 600% increase. We do provide, as I stated before, comprehensive toxicological analysis plus a complete autopsy. A lot of the jurisdictions in the United States are choosing not to do that for resource utilization. Somebody has the stigmata of drug use at the scene. Medical examiners and coroners are resorting to sign the cases as is without an examination or even a toxicological examination. To your question, 285,000, it is a decrease that we will try to cope with it. The more resources we have, the issue with toxicology now is the novel substances. The eyes cannot see what the brain doesn't know. That even goes for machines. So there are multiple substances that are appearing every week, every 2 weeks. And then those resources are applied to the software that we have to analyze the data in toxicology. The short of the long or the long of the short is those resources are needed to keep up with all the analysis that we are performing.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Diaz. And that concludes my questions for you, but I want to thank you and your entire team at OCME for all of the very difficult and important work that you do on behalf of district residents. And we'll keep thinking about how to partner with you in creative ways to build up that pipeline and get you the staffing that you need. I want to give you a chance if you have any closing thoughts or want to highlight something that we didn't get a chance to talk about today.
No, just to thank you, Councilmember Pinto, and thank you for your willingness and your efforts with working with OCME. I think I've been long-winded, so I think it will be my time to defer to other agencies.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, Dr. Diaz. Appreciate you. We are actually going to turn next to MOPI. I'm going to see if we have our public witness who is going to testify on behalf of MOPI, Karen Mulhauser. Are you here? I don't see her. Okay, Director Reyes, I may turn back to her after your opening statement, if that's all right, if she joins us. But oh, she's here. We are promoting her now. All right, great. So we are now turning to the Mayor's Office of Women's Policy and Initiatives. And we have a public witness, Karen Mulhauser, who will have 3 minutes to testify. Ms. Mulhauser, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Took me a while to get my audio on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Pinto and members of the committee. I am testifying today on behalf of the legislation that is in the committee on Mayor's Committee on Women and Policy Initiatives. My name is Karen Mulhauser. I've lived in Washington, D.C. since 1973, and I'm testifying in support, but as a citizen, not as a representative of any organization. It's I have been very involved in working for gender equity in this town for decades, and support for the legislation that was introduced by DC Council member Robert White is what I'm particularly interested in. And although this is a personal testimony, I've been working on the United Nations Association of the National Capital Area and the national organization to get this kind of legislation introduced around the country. And while I applaud the overwhelming support by the DC Council, the legislation passed unanimously last year, I'm shocked and disappointed that the budget does not include the necessary funding. DC has demonstrated a history of support for this kind of legislation. Back in 2005, the DC Council declared a sense of the Council with respect to the need for the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, Resolution 2005. And then 10 years later, David Grosso introduced legislation, but there was never a hearing. So last year, Robert White introduced the bill, and I am strongly in support of the legislation, the principles of implementing a UN treaty. The US is one of only 6 countries that has not ratified this treaty, and that's a little bit embarrassing to not even go on record supporting gender equity. But the bill would be implemented through the Mayor's Office of Women and Policy Initiative. And according to an October 22 statement by the chief financial officers, there are not the resources available to implement this. There would need to be 2 additional staff to develop guidelines, coordinate ongoing agency analysis, provide technical assistance to agencies, and develop citywide action plan to include the data. This is perhaps most shocking, is that not only were the necessary funds not included in the budget, but the entire MOPI, Mayor's Office of Women and Policy Initiatives, was reduced. The budget was reduced. So there's clear documentation that I can provide to you from other cities that have passed this kind of legislation, with dramatic reduction in violence against women, access to education and employment that wasn't otherwise available, addressing differences in family laws and so forth. So I strongly urge the committee to recommend necessary funding to allow the Mayor's Office of Women and Policy and Initiatives to hire the necessary staff to perform the functions and responsibilities outlined by the EDAW legislation. That's the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And now that the nation's capital has passed a law to eliminate discrimination against women, it should provide the necessary funding to implement it. And it's time that citizens of the national capital and throughout the country to urge the U.S. Senate to ratify the UN treaty. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sorry I got on a little late.
No problem. And thank you so much, Ms. Mulhauser, for joining us. And thank you for your consistent advocacy for this really important issue, not
Pretty
just in
consistent,
DC,
yes.
but around the country. I hope that we'll continue to see much needed improvements. And I think that, one of the things that we've talked to MOPI about in the past and during performance oversight was in thinking bigger about what types of impact they can be making as opposed to, or in addition to their really important work of amplifying the respective work of various agencies. And data is one piece and one way to make sure we're moving in the right direction there.
Well, in addition to working on this through the United Nations Association to implement a global treaty at the local level, I also serve on the DC Human Rights Commission, where gender equity is one of the 23 protected traits. And so there's a great deal of support for this. And clearly the funding is needed, but if the funding is not going to be there right away, it is plausible, and I'd be happy to help MOPI with this, that we could create some public-private partnerships where citizens would be able to support in some way. And also in 2017, Councilmember Charles Allen suggested that the city administrator might be able to add gender data to the annual performance reports. And that's another way to begin to do the first step of providing gender equity, is to find out where there are gender inequities. And it's also, I actually chair a new outreach committee, education and outreach committee at the DC Human Rights Commission. And we'd be able to help educate people about the availability of gender equity.
Okay, thank you. That's a great idea. We'll look into that a little bit more. And thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for having this hearing and for listening to citizens who care deeply and want to make our city, for its residents and its visitors, as equitable as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ms. Mulhauser. So we will next turn to Interim Director Reyes of the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives. And I would like to invite you to make any opening statement you have at this time, Director Reyes.
Yes, Councilwoman, and I just sit in as the Director of the Mayor's Office on Community Affairs in lieu of the Director of the Office on Women Policy. I will start with my statement. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Pinto, and members of the committee, and residents of the District of Columbia. My name is Jackie Reyes Llanes, and I'm honored to serve as the Director of the Mayor's Office on Community Affairs, affectionately known as MOCA. Under the visionary leadership of Mayor Muriel Bowser, for those familiars, MOCA is comprised of 14 constituent services offices focused on engaging residents, businesses, and stakeholders through community outreach, partnerships, and other agencies and strategies, as Mayor Bowser searches for the next dynamic leader to lead the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy, affectionately known as OWPI. I will be presenting today's testimony. I would like to say also thank you to the leadership of Jennifer Porter, who is now the lead at the Office on Victim Services and Justice Grants, for all the hard work that she did during her leadership here as the Director of the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy. Since the inception of MOPI has endeavored to enhance the quality of life for all women and their families in the District of Columbia through economic empowerment, civic engagement, and health and wellness. Our aim is to amplify government services to women and to be the liaison between the public and private sectors to create, innovate, and sustainable programs to support women thriving in our city. Last week, Mayor Muriel Bowser delivered the fiscal year 2024 first shot budget to the council. As she stated, this budget comes in a critical juncture for our city. We're fortunate that even in tight times, the district remains well-resourced and able to continue delivering world-class programs and services. Still, the budget reflects many tough choices, and it was formed with an eye towards how we get the best outcomes for our residents and make our strong comeback. MOPI's proposed budget is of $400,000 and $50,000. This included within the Executive Office of the Mayor FY24 operating budget of $21,430,773. The Chief of Staff, Lindsay Parker, will testify separately about the overall vision of the Executive Office of the Mayor. I want to highlight several of the programs that will continue and expand in the upcoming fiscal year. Heart disease remains the #1 killer for women in the District of Columbia, and we know the mental and physical health of women is often thought prioritized. Launched in 2019, we were proud to continue the Well Women Wednesdays, our quarterly fitness series in partnership with DC Department of Parks and Recreation and FitDC. On Wednesday, March 15, we kicked off a special Women History Month Soca and Sweat edition of the series that we look forward to another successful year with this partnership. Maternal health it continues to be a priority for Mayor Muriel Bowser's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives in the Bowser administration. This OWPI is excited to continue hosting the annual National Maternal Health Summit for the 6th year. Also, we're excited to increase our awareness to Help Me Grow program through the Carter Center Inform Women. From Forms the Lives campaign, MOPI will continue to amplify resources for the district women, families, and children to identify policies and initiatives to remove barriers to support their growth and development. Additional Maternal Mondays will remain in the state segment of our virtual programming to create connection for moms by discussing resources related to safety, self-care, and financial literacy, and more. And economic empowerment. In FY23, we also continue our financial FitDC and an initiative in partnership with the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, aimed at helping women to learn ways to be financially independent and help their families thrive through economic mobility. This series supports women by addressing socioeconomic influences and financial status, including domestic violence, education, and investing. And innovation of this series includes curating segments for teens in partnership with the Office on Financial Empowerment and the Department of Employment Services. MOPI continues its Work Smart wage negotiation training with the American Association of University of Women, hosting 4 opportunities to learn about ways that they can leverage their backgrounds to earn their worth. In FY23, we offered this session in Spanish with translated print resources. Women from all 8 wards were in attendance of MOPI's looks forward to continue our partnership with the American Association of University Women this year. We aim to provide this workshop with additional translation services, as well as directed links to the Department of Employment Services to enhance training. Civic engagement. As a policy office, MOPI continues to engage and activate women to participate in our government process, from learning and engaging our budget cycle, serving on boards and commissions, to engaging our youth to learn about ways they can improve our community, and learn about leading women in public service. We are excited to continue our commitment to civic engagement for women. The Commission for Women is planning MOPI's Be the Movement Women's Policy Bootcamp, and we have continued our 2018 partnership with Excel Academy to bring excitement presentations to Sister Circle, convening with them. These strategic programs and partnership allow us to continue precision programming to help women in the district's drive. We are grateful for our leadership and support, and invite you to join us in amplifying our government and women across our city. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering any questions that the committee may have. Mil gracias.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Interim Director Reyes. And thank you for taking on this role during this time, in addition to all of your other responsibilities. Do you know when the mayor is expected to nominate a permanent director?
So we are in a second round, so it will be shortly. And we have great women that have applied, so we are eager to, the mayor will name shortly the new lead here at MOPI.
Okay, that's very exciting. And I know I probably can't get a specific date, but when you say shortly, we're thinking like this spring?
Yes, you'll be sooner rather than later. So we have interview, and we're moving up to the leadership. So you will be getting a news soon.
And who knows, last time I asked at the one's office when an announcement could be expected, and the answer was shortly. It came the next day. So
so you may have some
We'll
surprise up to you.
Yeah. Okay. Can you shed some light on where the $44,000 is being made from MOPI's budget, and what impact that will have on services or programs you're currently providing?
Yes. So like I mentioned on my testimony, Councilwoman, our EOM is integrated with MOPI, so it won't be an effect into the overall operation of MOPI. Because if there's supplies, it will be under EOM budget, so all of the programming that we're doing, it won't be impacted.
Okay, so it's kind of like administrative supplies.
Yes, so sometimes it will move the 50 line item, but I can assure you the impact of the everyday operation, it won't be impacted.
Got it. Okay. And I understand that you're in this capacity as interim, and some of this will continue to be guided by the mayor and the new director. But while you're serving in this role, what do you see as most important for the agency to move forward on? What kind of initiatives would you like to see prioritized in FY 2024?
Yes. And Councilwoman, I just would like to rectify that, as the Mayor's Office and Community Relations Director, I work with all of the directors on a weekly basis. So we didn't miss a beat, under the director Porter or into the transition. So we're very hands-on with the day-to-day operation. Like we just had 33 events and during March, and we were out there, and thank you for also joining for a few events. But we are we are pivoting from COVID. So our ladies at the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy has been on the ground, talking to women from all walks of life. As you could see, last year's maternal health was very active and engaging. This year, we are committed on that. Like I mentioned on my testimony, that women's health and mental health is a priority for women. And as women, we are the households in our homes. So it's always the last person. So the Mayor's Office on Community on Women's Policy, they're always targeting to have that financial literacy, to have everything, all the programs necessary to come out from the COVID and pivot from keeping their jobs and being that support for their families. So those we know that we're facing challenges and barriers, and we are addressing those with our sister agencies also.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you for putting on all of those great events. And it's certainly nice to see you at many of them over the last several months. And this is something that I will continue working with you and the new director and the mayor on, but I think that there is an opportunity here with this agency to be more focused on improvements we would like to see in specific disparate outcomes that we continue to see with women. And so I would like to see and work with you on an additional focus on the kind of policy implementation recommendations there, in addition to the events and amplification of the work that other agencies are doing. Because I think we could see better impacts in a few areas that specifically affect women.
Yes, and we look forward at Councilwoman. I know that you are very progressive, and we are here to work for our constituents and identifying those policy impacting that you are looking into. The mayor has shown, her commitment to all women with the maternal health, especially, and then also early childhood and all of the different walks of life that DC women are.
Thank you. Well, that concludes my questions for you, Director. I just want to thank you again, and I'll add my thanks as well to Director Porter for her service. And I know we're excited to continue working with her in her new capacity at OBSJG. But if there's anything else you'd like to close with or share that we didn't get a chance to talk about, please go ahead.
Yeah, and this is another testament of the Mayor Bowser's commitment. She's always sees, always promote us with an end. Like I was the director on Latino Affairs, she promoted me. So she's always looking into promoting women into leadership roles. And now we have another example with our co-director who are leading a big agency, which is critical for women also.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. All right, we are now going to turn to our final agency of the day. Always here with us, Director. All right. I will turn now to Interim Director Anthony Crispino of the Department of Forensic Sciences, and would like to invite you to make any opening statement you may have at this time.
Thank you. Getting a little bit of feedback. Is that better? There we go. Okay, sorry about that, council member. All right, good afternoon, Chairperson Pinto, and any council members that have joined the panel, and the staff of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. As you're aware, I'm Anthony Crispino, the Interim Director of the Department of Forensic Sciences. Thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of the Honorable Mayor Muriel Bowser to discuss the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget for the Department of Forensic Sciences. The Mayor's FY24 budget, a fair shot, makes investments that are strategic, prudent, and focused on ensuring an equitable comeback for Washington, D.C. DFS is a critical component in protecting the health and safety of district residents and the public at large. We are a forensic and public health sciences agency that provides services to law enforcement, public health, and investigative agencies, including the Metropolitan Police Department, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the Office of the Attorney General, DC Health, and the Fire and Emergency Medical Services, and many others. Our continuing mission is to provide high quality, timely, accurate, and reliable forensic science services using the best practices and the best available technology, with a focus on unbiased science and transparency towards the goal of enhancing public health and safety. Despite the loss of accreditation for forensic operations, DFS has continued to deliver on our mission, and we are committed to attaining accreditation for the Forensic Science Laboratory. I'm proud to share that during the past fiscal year, we successfully retained accreditation for our public health laboratory and continued providing services for our public health laboratory through the crime scene sciences unit. I apologize. Mayor Bowser's FY24 budget for the Department of Forensic Sciences prepares us to continue the level of services we provide to the district and leverage the wealth of scientific and technical expertise of our staff to help deliver a safer, stronger DC. With your support, the FY24 budget will allow us to continue to first regain ANAB accreditation while continuing to meet the remainder of the statutory mandates set out in the Department of Forensic Sciences Act of 2011 to provide high quality, timely, accurate, and reliable forensic science services with the use of best practices and available technology. And 3, ensure a qualified workforce through efficient hiring and continual training. The Mayor's FY24 proposed operating budget for DFS is $20.6 million and funds 99 full-time employees. The Mayor's proposed capital budget for DFS is $1.4 million for a total proposed FY24 budget of $22 million. The operating budget has three components: local, federal, and private grant funds. The local budget represents $18.7 million and funds 83 FTEs. The federal grant budget represents $1 million and funds 7 FTEs, while the private grant budget totals $916,000 and funds an additional 9 FTEs. The proposed budget supports the following organizational components: the Forensic Science Laboratory Division, including the Forensic Biology Unit, the Latent Fingerprint Unit, Forensic Intelligence Unit, and the Forensic Chemistry Unit, as well as agency operations consisting of quality assurance, training, development, legal performance management, human resources, resource allocation, health and safety, and information technology support. Mayor's FY24 proposed budget will continue to support productivity levels of forensic testing expected by our stakeholders in accordance with our accrediting body standards. Under the FY24 budget, funding for personnel, training, equipment, instruments, reagents, analysts, and forensic outsourcing will ensure that DFS continues to play its vital role in driving down violent crime and keeping our communities safe in the district. As we continue our path to rebuilding and rebranding DFS, I would like to share a few key updates during the previous fiscal year from each of our key work streams, as well as plans for FY24, which will be realized with the approval of the mayor's FY24 budget proposal. The Forensic Science Laboratory was designed to provide scientific examinations and analysis to stakeholders submitting physical evidence cases, providing these services to district government agencies and neighboring federal agencies. Due to the loss of accreditation, all forensic testing has continued to be outsourced to external laboratories while the agency works diligently towards re-accreditation. The FY24 budget also includes funding for 10 additional FTEs, $2.6 million for outsourcing, and $627,000 for agency-wide training to support the reaccreditation process. To date, the Forensic Science Laboratory has received over 1,100 service requests from stakeholders, including the Metropolitan Police Department, United States Attorney's Office, and the Office of the Attorney General, with monthly requests averaging similar volume as prior fiscal years. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has continued to provide DFS with support and processing of test fires and entries into the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, or NIBIN. With the procurement of a second NIBIN machine, ATF has been able to process additional casings from scenes such as sounds of gunshots. In calendar year 22, over 2,000 test fires were completed. Year to date, we are on track to surpass last year's totals. In Q1 of FY23, the Forensic Biology Unit received 17 combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, database hits, which are instrumental in identifying suspects and closing criminal cases here in the district. For instance, due to a CODIS database entry and hit in August of 2022, a suspect was identified and charged in a 2005 first-degree sexual abuse while armed gun case against a juvenile. From the DNA collected from the victim's physical evidence recovery kit by the DFS Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, or SAKI team, to date, the FBU has continued to work with external laboratories and outsourcing casework, effectively triaging homicides, sexual assaults, and carjackings. In addition to its contract laboratories, the Forensic Biology Unit has established partnerships with other state crime laboratories such as Wyoming State Crime Lab and Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection to upload CODIS data. In Q1 of FY23, the Forensic Chemistry Unit processed 474 samples under the syringe surveillance program. Additionally, with continuous surveillance of syringes provided, continuous surveillance of syringes provided from DC harm reduction centers, FCU identified 3 major trends in the injectable drug supply: the emergence of a new amphetamine type stimulant, ATS, called dipentylene, a decline in the presence of fentanyl in syringes, and a significant increases in the ATSs, particularly that of methamphetamine, indicating a shift in intravenous use of depressants like opioids to stimulants like amphetamines. In Q1 of FY23, the Latent Fingerprint Unit had 364 automated fingerprint identification system entries with 88 AFIS database hits. To date, the LFU has continued outsourcing of casework to our current contractor with no AFIS backlog. Additionally, LFU has undergone a performance gap analysis and is currently at the midpoint of a rigorous training program that highlights key points in fingerprint analysis, such as palm and footprints, distortion interpretation, suitability decisions, error rate studies, approximate use of inconclusive and exclusion, and testimony skills. Turning to the Public Health Laboratory. The Public Health Laboratory provides testing of biological and chemical samples that relate to public health and safety, such as infectious diseases, hazardous chemicals, or biological contamination, up to and including biological or chemical terrorist attacks. Under the mayor's FY24 budget, this function is realigned to DC Health with the goal of providing a clear structure as DFS rebrands as an agency solely focused on testing and analysis of evidence collected in relation to criminal casework. The Crime Scene Sciences Division provides the collection, analysis, processing, and preservation of evidence found associated with the crime scene that is critical to solving crimes in the district. Under the mayor's proposed FY24 budget, this function is also realigned to the Metropolitan Police Department, again, to allow DFS the ability to focus exclusively on testing and analysis of criminal evidence collected at scenes of crimes as a partner in the district and local areas judiciary community. Turning to agency operations, the mayor's FY24 proposed budget ensures continuation of essential and critical administrative and support service functions such as human resources, information technology, community and outreach, forensic intelligence analysis, operations, budget, procurement, and performance management, and employee health and safety services. For instance, the agency has continued to make strides in the laboratory information management system upgrade project, with the latest version deployment converting the forensic chemistry unit to the new platform, with the forensic biology and latent fingerprint unit scheduled for the summer of this fiscal year. The forensic request for testing approval process has also been enhanced to ensure timely results for stakeholders based on probative evidence and outsourcing capacity. And in the agency's pursuit of reaccreditation, the Forensic Science Laboratory Division, we have continued to implement recommendations issued in the December 2021 SNA International Report, such as securing the expertise of Evolve Forensics to conduct an independent assessment for the latent fingerprints unit, working with the consulting firm Forensic Analysis Consulting and Training, better known as FACT, to ensure efficiency in departmental manuals and standard operating procedures in compliance with audit recommendations and accrediting body standards. The completion of a management training series with the George Washington University, and training conducted by the ANAB for staff to develop executable skills to conduct an internal audit under ISO IEC 17025-2017 standards, and the establishment of an online complaint form for customers and stakeholders. The mayor's FY24 proposed capital improvements plan of $1.4 million provides critical funding to ensure that the agency has the instruments and equipment required for forensic testing and analysis, as well as the IT infrastructure to support the needs of a technology-forward agency. In closing, I would like to reiterate the mayor's FY24 A Fair Shot budget makes investments that are strategic, prudent, and focused on ensuring an equitable comeback for Washington, D.C. As such, I would like to thank the mayor, City Administrator Donahue, and the staff for their ongoing support of DFS and the effort they have put into developing the proposed FY24 budget. I would also like to thank Deputy Mayor OWPI, her staff, and our public safety partners who also continue to support DFS. Thank you, Chairperson, and your staff for the continued oversight and support of DFS. Finally, I'd like to thank the remarkable staff and DFS for their continued support and commitment to build back better as we work towards reaccreditation. We appreciate the opportunity to share our achievements, our plans for continued improvement in the coming year, and look forward to working with the committee. This concludes my testimony, and I welcome your questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Director. So that's helpful to hear some of the plans and timelines moving forward with our shared goal for reaccreditation. But I want to start by asking you about the elephant in the room, which is the mayor's proposal to move 2 of 3 of DFS's divisions to other agencies. So let's start with the Crime Scene Services Division. Do you support this shift? Why do you think CSS falling under MPD rather than your own agency will enhance the division's work? Or is this just a measure while we seek reaccreditation to keep things in-house?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I support the mayor's budget. I don't think that this move will affect the forensic laboratory's ability to analyze evidence that's collected. I think that the budget proposal that's come forward is consistent with the letter that she transmitted in December that spoke about her concerns about the agency's independence and shielding it from undue influences from external entities. And I think that this move is in line with that. To reiterate what the city administrator said on Friday, it's my understanding that the move was implemented or is proposed so that the forensic laboratory can focus on the critical steps that are next in the reaccreditation process.
And what does that mean exactly, that they can focus on the critical steps? Is that a time resource challenge, or what do you mean by that?
Well, I think I brought this up in my performance oversight hearing the other month. We are, as you know, we're one of the few consolidated laboratories in the nation. There's less than a handful. And what I took from the city administrator's statement on that was that managing 3 divisions as opposed to just focusing on the forensics is a challenging task. And the administration wants the laboratory to have the ability to solely focus on the forensic analysis portion of it. As you can see by the proposed moves that are outlined in the budget, the 2 divisions in question would be going back to the parent agencies that existed prior to the 2012 stand-up of the laboratory.
Okay. But this MPD shift in particular was part of the debate when CSS came within DFS. And I'm concerned about shifting our crime scene analysis work to MPD and the effect that could have on the independent analysis of CSS staff, which I want to be very clear, I do not in any way want to impugn the integrity of your CSS staff or of MPD. But we know that there is a tremendous pressure that folks across the country feel to produce outcomes that are helpful to their supervisor or when they're specifically involved in a case. And this is something I'll be talking to MPD about as well. But how do you think that if this shift persists, that staff can remain impartial?
Well, I mean, anybody that's coming from my agency, if this move goes through, if the council were to enact the BSA as it stood and the transfers went through, anybody that came from my agency understands the importance of impartiality, and they take their job very seriously, whether or not they're here at DFS or if they're at MPD. But that said, the FSL, the Forensic Science Laboratory, as part of our reaccreditation process, I mean, we are currently working with FACT to go through all of our quality documents and procedures, and we do have SOPs in place that dictate what the lab will accept as evidence, what we will actually analyze, and that's in line with the recommendations which are in the PCAST report, which I think you're tying this back to, which talks about trying to keep implicit bias out of the analysis portion of evidence collection. And FSL would not abandon those standards. The filters would not come down. It would still act as a firewall. So the laboratory would still do everything in its power to ensure whatever evidence crosses our threshold is looked at impartially and with current standards in mind.
But with all due respect, what does that mean, everything within your power, if the division is being moved out of DFS?
Well, I'm focusing on FSL. Like I said, anybody that's in my agency, regardless of where they end up at the end of the budget season, they have been trained. They understand the importance of partiality. They understand the mission. They know how to collect evidence consistent with those requirements or that guidance from PCAST and the subsequent reports that came out. to your point, they would be at MPD, but my expectation is they would continue to conduct themselves professionally and align with the standards that are applicable to this industry, to the forensic industry. What I'm referring to is that the portion of the lab that would remain would constitute DFS. I mean, that is the portion of the agency that is seeking reaccreditation and would have the 17025 standards to adhere to. If we get accreditation, we would have to adhere to those standards. And I can tell you, because as I've mentioned in my opening statement, we recently brought A&AB in at the agency's cost to train our first cohort of staff, including myself, on down to line folks, in conducting internal reviews and assessments. And as we looked at the provisions of accreditation, they stress the importance of impartiality. They stress the importance of ensuring that you adhere to your SOPs. So to the extent that you're concerned that some sort of evidence would be pushed into the agency and somehow, or there somehow would be an attempt to bias the outcome of analysis, those standards are meant to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Okay. And the budget retains about $293,000 and one FTE in the crime scene services division in FY 2024. Do you know what this is for? Is this a mistake, or what is the staff are going to be doing?
Let me check with bear with me.
So the FTEs that stayed, we were told that they provide other services.
Oh.
To the
Okay, so I mean, with any agency, and I was talking to our cluster AFO. With any agency, you have different positions that are tied to different functions. Like they do more than just what is outlined in a Schedule A. And it's my understanding that this one individual, this one FTE in particular, does multiple responsibilities, not just related to crime scene, and that's why the position's remaining.
Okay. Okay. And then in terms of the public health laboratory,
Mhm.
do you support shifting the public health laboratory to DC Health? And how do you believe that housing PHL under our health department will enhance the lab's work?
Well, I mean, look, as an interim director, it's tough to hear that any part of your agency is being shifted somewhere from one place to another. But I do support the mayor's budget. I do support what the thought process is. And with the public health laboratory, as you're aware, my folks, they generate the data that the epidemiologists are using to combat novel outbreaks, foodborne illnesses, rabies. So if the move were to go through with the passing of the budget, then it would continue to complement the mission, that we would still be able to provide the district the services.
Will these staff be housed at DC Health physically? Are they going to be moving to a new location or remain on site in their current lab?
On site in the current lab. I'm not aware that DC Health has the facilities to conduct what the PHL is doing now, and it would be redundant if we built out another facility. So my understanding is that this is an exercise on paper. They'll physically remain here, as will their instrumentation.
Okay. So what will change in practice with this move?
I mean, you're taking one separate entity and you're now parsing out two divisions to two additional agencies, all in the same combined space. So, I mean, there are issues that we'll have to work through, DFS issues, the IT, physical space, things of that nature, licensure fees and stuff like that. But that can be accomplished through MOUs and intra-district transfers.
Okay. The budget proposes shifting just 31 of the 40 FTEs in this division to DC Health. So what will the remaining 9 PHL FTEs be doing?
private grant funded.
It's one of two things. It could either be grant positions that didn't shift, or if memory, or it could be the other issue related to our DSAP program, which you can't, if you're not aware, the DSAP program is the component of DFS, or the public health laboratory, that examines organisms that could be weaponized. Everybody involved in that program has to be vetted at a federal level, and it's not as easy as just picking those folks up and moving them. They requires advanced approval from our federal partners. So it's one of those two issues, and I can get you that information.
Okay, thank you, sir. And just one more question on this, and then I'll turn to my colleague, Councilmember Henderson, who I imagine may have some questions about this shift as well. The city administrator stated that the shift to DC Health will help with determining distribution of grants for which PHL and DC Health are eligible. But does this just mean that DC Health will be able to unilaterally tell PHL what it gets rather than seeking compromise?
I mean, in short, yes, but that structure already exists. There are certain grants that the CDC has told us that the PHL is individually eligible for, but many of our grant revenue streams for the PHL, the DC Health works as a pass-through from the CDC. So it's already semi in place, especially with some of the larger block grants where the PHL is just getting a portion for a specific program. So they're dispersing money from an umbrella grant funding pot. And so, yes, they get to dictate where the funds go to, consistent with the grant requirements, of course.
Okay. Okay, I will pause there and turn to my at-large colleague, Councilmember Christina Henderson, who's also a member of the committee, for a 10-minute round. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson Pinto, and good afternoon, Director. I kind of want to pick up a little bit where Councilmember Pinto was. As the chairperson of the Committee on Health, my biggest question was about this move of the public health laboratory. And I asked the mayor a little bit about this at the hearing on Friday, but I need to dig into this a little bit deeper to basically try to understand why. If the public health, I think in your testimony, you said the public health laboratory has already received its accreditation back, correct?
Well, not back, but it was renewed. Yes, ma'am.
So it was renewed. So this move wasn't about something around there were issues with hold on, I'm going to turn off my camera so perhaps that will help with my.
Oh, sorry, you cut out a little. I think I know where we're going with the question, but you cut out a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess my question is around I think we need a public health lab, but why move it to DC Health if they are still physically going to be sitting at DFS?
I mean, as the city administrator indicated, the executive's desire is, I guess, to streamline the entire entity. And if they're informing the epidemiologist, the thought process is that as one agency instead of two disjointed agencies, that would promote efficiency.
Okay, but so let's go. Well, you're interim, but you obviously have some history in terms of the organization. And I'll ask this of DC Health. Did the public health lab used to be part of DC Health?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know why it was moved in the first place?
I actually don't. I don't know when they stood up DFS why that portion was carved out of DC Health. I don't.
Okay. So, all right. So we'll dig into that. It might have been creating efficiencies around, we're about to spend $215 million to build a new state-of-the-art facility. Go use the labs over there as opposed to creating redundancies. Maybe, I don't know. I'll ask DC Health. Okay, but in terms of conversations around governance, has that happened yet? So I can imagine it could be some conflict if you have 99 FTEs that belong to DC Health that are sitting in your building presumably sharing lab space with your staff?
Those conversations have not happened yet, as we've literally just digested the budget, but they are going to have to happen as this process progresses. And then as with, I guess if you want to consider, DC agency siblings, there will be some growing pains that we will have to talk about, because you're right, we will be co-occupying actual physical space, laboratory space, figuring out how the instrumentation, is maintained, the costs, all of those things that are associated with operations. Yes, we'll have to have those conversations.
Okay. I heard a little bit in terms of the conversation that you were having with Councilmember Pinto about the crime scene analysis. And I will just say this out, like, there's nothing that I have read in the report about DFS from, the review, and then in terms of best practices that would suggest having the police department both collect evidence and analyze evidence is going to lead to some type of different outcome, because there is always going to be this feeling of bias.
Well, I just want to clarify, the police department, even under this budget proposal, would not be doing the analysis and would not have any input on the actual analysis of the evidence recovered. Now, the detectives, as the individuals following the leads, they would give input to the analysts on what they felt had probative value based upon their investigation, but it would still be the scientists at the laboratory looking at the evidence. Take like biology, if it was a piece of evidence, they would look at whatever biological materials on the evidence, and they would still determine, yes, this could have actual probative value, and this is what should be tested.
Okay, but wouldn't there be helpful if the DFS folks were actually on the scene?
The scientists, or
No.
or
So we're moving the crime scene sciences division to MPD.
correct.
So I guess let's back up. What does that entail?
Again, similar to the lab folks, they would not be changing locations as I understand it. So they would still be housed here. The evidence would still eventually come back here, but they would be under the direction of the Metropolitan Police Department.
Oh, okay. So this is new. So it is envisioned that those individuals would still sit at DFS, but then report to MPD?
At least for the time being, like those details haven't been ironed out. I haven't had an opportunity to discuss the budget yet, with the budget proposals yet, with my counterparts at MPD.
Okay. I know you're in a difficult position here as being an interim, but I'm going to tell you what it sounds like to me. It sounds like to me, you got a document, maybe, I don't know, 24 hours before we got a document, and you're still having to sort of work through this and haven't had an opportunity to talk to your now close sister agencies to determine how this proposal is actually going to work.
Well, I got the budget at the same time that the other directors did, with the budget process. As you're aware, I put forth, my wish list for the agency during my BRT, and then, the process at that point is shifted over to OBPM and OCA to figure out how it best fits within the overarching budget.
Okay, I don't want to put you in a tough position. I like you a lot, so I don't want to put you in a tough position. I'll just move on. I guess I'm just trying to understand, and you could say maybe this is a better question for Chief Conti in terms of why move. I'm putting this in quotation marks. Why move these folks over if they're still going to be sitting? And at the end of the day, the analysis is still going to be done by the scientists in your department.
Yes, that question would probably be directed towards either the police department or the public safety cluster.
Okay. I don't know how much time. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay. One other thing I wanted to ask you about. Well, let's see. Okay. Let's start here. You told the committee in February that you expected the reaccreditation application would be submitted this spring or summer. Has that timeline changed?
No, and I'm glad you asked the question.
Okay, great.
I can give you both you and the chairperson an update. I've spoken with the chief principal at FACT And I actually am happy to report, like even since my performance hearing, the steps that I discussed then, we have made meaningful progress. So I think as you guys were aware, the next step in the process was completing mock casework because we've been outsourcing our work for now about 21 months. So we had to have a body of work under our new SOPs or our streamlined SOPs to show that they work. So I can report that the chemistry unit, they began their casework on March 21st, and I believe 2 chemists have actually already finished it. So they are very anxious to get back to work. Team 1 of the biology unit began its casework on the 27th, and additional teams will start in subsequent weeks as they use the laboratory space. Our internal audit is because we've had the ANAB training, the internal audit is scheduled to begin April 3rd, and it will continue through the following week. Then FACT will be on site April 18th and 19th to do the mock assessment, which is essentially running through the checklist that ANAB assessment team would be running us through. And then depending on the results of that mock assessment, any corrective action reports that come out of it or other concerns, then we have to do a required management review. And again, the ANAB training that my team has now received, we will be able to do that in a meaningful way. And then as soon as the management review is complete, at that point, FACT believes that we can engage ANAB to actually start the official reaccreditation process and submit our paperwork. So we are making steps. My folks are hard at work in the laboratory, and we believe that we're on track.
Okay, that's a great update in terms of that work. And I hate to do this, but I have to. I need to look back for a moment. Yep. So obviously, with everything that happened with the lab, obviously pre your time, but it happened.
Yes.
My understanding is that there are several thousand cases over a 10-year period that needs to be independently reevaluated.
Correct.
Now, I had heard that there was an RFP that was put out for this project manager. It was pulled back, obviously not in your wheelhouse or whatnot, but in this budget that I see for you for DFS, I don't see any additional dollars here for that project. Is that correct?
Correct. However, as you recall, for the look back process, which you're referring to, the cases that SNA said that in the divisions that or the units that were affected, by mayor's order, that was delegated to the deputy mayor's office to convene the ad hoc committee with OAG, USAO, Federal Protective Service, and the Public Defender Service. And I believe in the prior fiscal year, the current fiscal year, DFS actually carved out of its budget a significant amount of funding to seed that project. Now, it's under the purview of the deputy mayor, but the agency made funding available. So when it progresses under the deputy mayor's leadership, we will continue to support.
Okay, I'll follow up with her on that. Thank you so much, Director. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I'm over Pinto. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, for being here. So Director, just picking up on the questions about reaccreditation, do you think that this budget proposal will have any effect on the reaccreditation efforts as we see, major funding and division shifts and reductions? What does that mean for recruiting lab staff and providing the necessary training as we continue our shared goal of having robust quality controls in place on the path for reaccreditation?
I'm glad you asked. So no, I don't see it overall affecting the outcome of reaccreditation. As I said, as the city administrator said, it allows the laboratory to focus on just accreditation process. And in the budget, last year, I believe I asked for the same amount and it was approved. I asked for approximately $627,000 in training, which we got as an enhancement. And this budget includes the same dollar amount, which my folks are using. Trust me, like for instance, the ANAB training that we just recently completed, that came out of that. So the budget supports us training wise. It also supports us financially for the outsourcing that has to continue while we delve into the reaccreditation process, and it is sufficient funding to cover the outsourcing needs. And it also actually includes an enhancement in the biology unit where it would add 10 vacancies, I believe, 8 analysts and 2 support staff, which is something that I've said in previous testimony is needed because when we come back online, we want to wean ourselves off of contractual support. And in order to do that, we needed to upstaff DNA. That is a linchpin, I think, in solving some of these violent crimes that are occurring in the district.
The mayor has proposed a Budget Support Act subtitle to reverse a number of the amendments that were made in the Restoring Trust and Credibility to Forensic Sciences Amendment Act of 2023. 2022. I'd like to understand the agency's rationale for some of these changes. So first, it strikes the requirement that the mayor's selection of the chief forensic sciences officer be confirmed by the council. This position is critical to ensuring quality control, training, and other services at DFS meet reaccreditation standards and maintain those standards once DFS is reaccredited. Why shouldn't the council advise and consent to this critical appointee?
I can only surmise that given the difficulty, completely agree. The position is critical to the agency. It's mentioned in the SNA report. It is something that the agency fully intends to staff. But I think what the aim of that provision has to do with recruitment. It is a very small applicant pool. You're looking for someone with very specific, very extensive skill sets, and imposing a confirmation requirement. My guess is that it would limit the number of people that want to subject themselves to that.
I guess you could make that argument for any position. But I understand you're in a tough spot. The subtitle would also reverse language in the act establishing DFS as an independent agency. How will retaining DFS's status as an agency subordinate to the mayor enhance services, programming, or operations of the agency?
Well, this goes back to what I was saying about the mayor's letter from the end of December when the bill was being considered for a second reading. And it is my understanding that both the city administrator and the mayor believe that having the laboratory remain a subordinate agency allows the city administrator the ability to provide support at his level with external entities should an issue arise over how the lab is operating. It provides an extra layer of support that if we were independent, it would just be the laboratory on its own. Yeah.
Okay. And so is it a fair assessment to say, unlike the shift of having some of these services provided in other agencies, whether that be MPD or DC Health, the layer of support to have a reporting system within DFS to the executive will be helpful? I shouldn't say it that way because you didn't say it would be unhelpful in the former, but that will be helpful to accountability, not to be independent.
So it's helpful. Yes, it would be helpful. Having the city administrator, being able to rely on the city administrator to help guide issues through it at his level, that is helpful to the agency. Being able to go to that position who has overarching control over the daily operations of the district government, I don't see that as an impediment to the lab's ability to achieve scientific independence. I talked about this with I believe Councilman Allen in one of our previous hearings. It's not so much where the agency falls within the government that in terms of independence, it's more achieving scientific independence. And I believe that the work that we're doing with FACT in rewriting our SOPs and our rebuilding our quality assurance unit to adhere to the 17025 standard, I think that's the scientific independence that needs to be achieved in the spirit of PCAST and the subsequent reports on evidence and bias.
Okay. I have a pretty blunt question to ask you.
Fire away.
As I see these shifts, and I know we're working towards reaccreditation, but then 2 of the 3 divisions are being proposed to be moved out of DFS. Is this the first step to phase out DFS entirely?
No,
The budget.
that's not my understanding. I have not been told anything to that extent. I have been told that the city administrator acknowledges the importance of the agency, the work it's doing. He has a long history with the agency going back to when he was the deputy mayor of public safety and justice. And I've also, the mayor has also expressed her support of the laboratory and the work that it's doing.
But how can we ensure that the forensic science lab won't be relocated to another agency next year's budget?
I couldn't say with certainty, but I don't think that would be a likely scenario. The laboratory, the forensic laboratory as envisioned in this budget, it remains a separate entity. While it reports to the mayor, the work it's doing still remains separate. And I don't think that there is any inclination to alter that. In my conversations with the city administrator, he understands that I have been passionate in those conversations where the work of the lab needs to continue. It is vital to the residents to have the laboratory, to have that analysis separate from the Metropolitan Police Department. And he has expressed that, it will continue in its form, at least the forensic lab will.
Okay. So moving on from those 2 divisions, the mayor's budget also proposes eliminating 16 FTEs from the forensic science lab.
Yes.
Are all of these FTEs currently vacant?
Yes. Subsequent to the downcast in the revenue, the projected revenue by the chief financial officer, every agency was asked to address the shortfall across the district. We were able to do so without affecting any current positions. And I can say with certainty that the positions that we offered up will not affect the reaccreditation process at this time.
Okay. I guess I'm just worried because across agencies throughout the FY 2024 budget, the mayor has proposed eliminating hundreds of vacant positions. And I see that technically these positions are unfilled. And so the funds are available to be utilized for other priorities. But I'm concerned that these positions are really crucial to the operations of the agency.
Well, I mean,
And like specifically, do these positions need to be filled, as opposed to just because they're not filled doesn't necessarily mean they don't need to be filled?
No, even if we were to reobtain accreditation tomorrow, they would not be filled. I made a very pointed. I had a very pointed conversation with my COO, and we were considering what cuts we needed to be made, and we both were adamant that they had to be positions that would not affect agency operations in the long run, and they do not. And I mean, as you can see, when we proposed the 24 budget, we asked for increases in DNA, and those increases were granted. And that's because in the prioritization of reaccreditation of the units, we expect that the work in FBU, when we turn the switch back on after we get accredited, the work will ramp up very quickly and that we needed the resources. The chief executive recognized that and included the increase in FPU in our budget.
Okay. The agency's budget proposal reduces funding for overtime to $180,000, which represents a 72% reduction from last year. You spent $1.1 million in overtime in FY 2022. Can you explain how this $180,000 investment will cover overtime costs next year?
So,
Especially when we aren't hiring for the vacant positions?
well, I mean, prior to, in previous budget cycles, we did have a lot of vacancies in crime scene, and I believe our vacancy rate 2 budget cycles ago was 10%. We've reduced it down to, I think, either 7 or 8%. So we have been hiring. We have hired 2 classes in crime scene. I believe we've just hired more folks for crime scene. So we continue to fill those positions, and especially in areas where we were short and that was leading to overtime costs. We're attempting to reduce the overtime costs by working with the managers on adjusting the schedule, working with the union to make sure that the schedule is adjusted so that we don't have to trigger overtime costs. And the majority of the overtime costs were actually in the CSS unit because they're 24/7 and they have to respond. And the other thing that I have to point out as well, I mean, again, the elephant in the room, if this budget's enacted and the CSSU goes to MPD, I don't expect to have that pressure in the following fiscal year because laboratory folks don't work overtime unless we're addressing an outbreak.
Okay, that makes sense. In other words, if we reverse that shift, we're going to need to fund sufficient funding for overtime.
I will continue to drive down over costs, working with Director Wheeler Moore, and continuing, if I have the authority and the spots, to continue to put folks in seats in crime scene, because you're right, we need to continue addressing violent crime rates in the city.
Do you have totals available for how much the agency spent on outsourcing last year?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can, I can get you the exact dollar amount. We track that for sure.
Okay.
I don't want to just shoot a number off the top of my head in case I'm off by, a significant amount, but yes, we have the totals and I will happily get those to you.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. That would be great if you could share that with the committee.
Yes, absolutely.
This budget proposal includes a $2.6 million one-time enhancement to outsource fingerprinting and DNA testing. So do you have a sense on how many analyses this enhancement would cover and what you spent in the last couple of years on DNA testing?
It will, I believe the thought process was it will cover what we've done in previous budget cycles, the 2 previous budget cycles during the loss of accreditation. And I believe this enhancement was to ensure that if additional capacity arises in some of the external labs, that we can work through any backlogs that we are accruing. Because you have to remember, there's a finite number of external labs that can handle our volume of work. And even though we are using our contracts to their full extent, it still creates each month a little bit more of a backlog, and we're going to need the money even after we're accredited to work down those backlogs. So that's what that's representing.
Okay. There's a budget enhancement of $627,000 for technical and professional development training, which I'm glad to see. What will that training entail, and which staff will be eligible for that training?
That is for the entire agency. In the SNA report, they calculated that we needed to spend approximately $3,000 per employee, I believe, at a minimum, to ensure that they were fully trained staff. They could attend conferences. Some of the folks in the laboratories need to attend certain conferences. We recently sent the PHL management team down to the CDC. So that covers all of the incidentals that are associated with that. The ANAB training that we did, we flew the ANAB trainer to the site so that we could get the most bang for our buck. But it's things like that, and that will continue as we go through the accreditation process and beyond.
Okay. How much funding is in this budget to support forensic lab staff obtaining credentials in their particular disciplines?
So the 627, as I understand it from the attorneys, we are allowed to pay for training leading up to the point of licensure or certification, but I don't believe we, under the regulations, we're actually allowed to pay for the actual licensure or accreditation fee. So it's that 627 encompasses everything up to that. Case in point, the latent fingerprints folks who are going through training now. The goal with that process is to get them to the point where they can sit for the IAI certification. This will help cover the cost leading up to that. I can't pay for the actual certificate if they pass the test, but it'll cover everything up to that.
Okay. And then turning to the capital budget, the forensic evidence digital storage capital project, which invests in enhancements to DFS's data storage system capacity, is reduced by $500,000 in both FY 2024 and 2025, which halves the funding for the project in those years. What effect will that budget reduction have on this work? And do those upgrades have any relation to our work and our effort in seeking reaccreditation? Will reducing funding affect that timeline?
I think that I want to say that I think that reflects the shift of some of the operations over to MPD, because remember, like some of the units that are going or PHL, some of the technology that they're using, the cost would shift to the other agency. And I think that's what it reflects. But for the laboratory, the forensic laboratory itself, it won't affect reaccreditation. My chief technology officer continues to work on the laboratory inventory management system upgrade project. We continue to work on migrating stuff to the cloud. We're looking to digitize as much as possible. And I don't see anything in the CIP that would affect or impede his progress in that regard.
I'm sorry, my HVAC system just kind of got very loud. And so I couldn't hear you at the end.
Oh, I don't see anything in the CIP that would affect his ability to implement the projects that are currently underway in the FSL.
Okay, we'll look into this a little bit more and see what's going on there. Okay, well, thank you very much, Director. That concludes my questions for you. I have some more conversations to have, I'll put it that way, about the crime scene services move especially, and share your belief and want to continue supporting your efforts for reaccreditation, which are so important to the agency and to our public safety goals in the city, not just for costs, of course, but for speed and efficiency and accuracy of closing these cases and bringing about justice. So thank you for your continued efforts there. And I want to thank you and your entire staff for all the hard work that you do throughout the year. And I want to give you a chance, Director, if you have any other closing thoughts or want to highlight something that we didn't have a chance to discuss today.
I just want to thank you for your oversight. Our interactions so far have been very productive, I think, and I really look forward to working with you for the duration of my tenure. And I think together we can make sure that the reaccreditation process goes through as seamlessly as possible and gets the services that the district residents so desperately deserve or back online. So I look forward to working with you and your staff.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, well, there being no further business before the committee, I want to thank all of our agencies for joining us today for these budget hearings. We will have additional hearings this coming Friday. The time is now 5:23 p.m. on Wednesday, March 29th, and we are adjourned.